in a broad way in order to move currency or to move money from one country to another without impacting the currency itself. And I think use of this technology in a scalable way in many other ways, I think, is one way for us to reestablish global trust. All right, finally, I want to spend a few minutes and talk about digital manufacturing. Now, you heard that term this morning, and you read it, and it makes sense. I know what digital is, I know what manufacturing is, but then after that, you're like, okay, what exactly does digital manufacturing mean? So I want to talk about that, and I want to talk about the changes it will have, and we'll pull it all back together about how security, AI, and the digital manufacturing economy will radically change everything about our business today. So we're all familiar with the Industrial Revolution. We talked about it a little bit this morning, right? For the last 150 years, we essentially did things in the same way. We designed in one location. Over time, we migrated the manufacturing of that to either a low-cost geography or we automated it. But we did it in a centralized way. And then after we did it, we loaded all of our goods on container ships, and then we shipped the container ships all around the world to get the goods where we needed them. That activity, that simple activity of loading all the crap that we want to buy onto container ships and sending it around the world consumes 5% of our world's oil supply. In a world of denser cities, in a world of 8.6 billion people, it is an activity that will not scale. So we have to take a fundamentally different approach about how we're going to do manufacturing. Enter digital manufacturing. Digital manufacturing, everything front to back is digital. Some of this is already happening today. We do design in digital. We have CAD tools that design product, design parts right up front in a digital way. We transfer those, and we tend to transfer them to individual pieces where they're made in this attractive manner into individual companies or suppliers. But what happens in digital is you transfer the digital file to the place where it's going to be consumed, the entire design. You're pushing the digital representation of the object to the final location. In the final location, it could be anywhere in the world. It can be customized. It can be changed. It can be edited. It could be colorized. It could be, change aspects of it to be pertinent to what's going on in that area in the world at the time. And then once it's personalized, it is printed or manufactured on demand. No warehouses. No staging of it over a period of time. No holding things on your balance sheet that are consuming capital for you. Instead, what happens is printed in a digital way. And this is what's so profound and unique about multi-jet fusion. Multi-jet fusion is the only digital 3D print technology that can print at the quality of manufacturing. All other 3D technologies, FDM, SLS, all the other prominent ones are analog. They use a single common way in which you produce parts. Multi-jet fusion is digital. End-to-end digital. Design digital, print in the locale in which it's consumed. Now, when you get to this point, there's going to be profound changes that will happen. And this isn't going to happen next year. It's not going to happen probably in 3 years. We'll probably see pieces of this happen in that 5-year time frame where sections of things will be manufactured in this way. But it will most definitely happen in a 30-year window. And in that 30-year window, you're going to see some rather profound changes. What constitutes trade in a digital manufacturing environment? I'm moving data from one place to the other. You're not tax moving data from one place to the other now, for the most part. You can find exceptions. But now you're just moving data from one country to the other. So what constitutes an import tax or an export tax? What happens to manufacturing in the environments when suddenly it's not having to be done in one common place? It can be done in a place of consumption. It changes the nature of jobs. What happens to intellectual property? Because it's digital. Digital can be encoded with intellectual property rights. I can put 3D watermarks on parts themselves, and I can secure that part, and that part belongs to a particular person with particular rights, and all of that may actually be encoded in a blockchain representing those particular rights. All of that embedded a part itself. No longer do you have where somebody can crank out fake version of a part over and over again. You have the ability to protect the IP of the part itself. And finally, it will impact our business. It will impact how we design products, how we distribute them, how we manage a supply chain. And it's for these reasons, and it's because of this vision of how we think manufacturing is going to change, how we're going to transform a $12 trillion manufacturing. It's for these reasons that we've invested in Workstation, the most powerful desktop workstation you heard in the Z8 this morning. Why we invest in multi-jet fusion. Why we continue to iterate on that for manufacturing use. And just by way of analogy, if I rewound 30 years ago, and you thought about where we were relative to photography, it was silver halide. There was no online. There was no digital. We took pictures the old-fashioned way with a roll of film. And then you hoped, when you sent it in, that you got back pictures that, maybe a percentage of them were actually useful. Well, it took 30 years. But that industry was completely transformed, and now you cannot find film anywhere. Even in Africa, even in India, you cannot find film anywhere. Same thing we believe will happen in manufacturing. Profound change that will affect all of us in the lives that we live. So I'm going to come back to the megatrends piece, and then we're going to be able to have a few minutes here for Q&A. So I told you I was going to take you for a ride on the crazy train, and I was going to give you all manner of interesting thought here of how technology is going to evolve. So I'm going to give you a little bit of time. There's mics, one over here, can't see it, but and then one over here. Come up and ask questions. While you're thinking about it, I want to come back to the megatrends. Over the next 30 years, there's going to be a profound set of changes that are going to happen in society around us. How we live, where we live, it's all going to change in a profound way. And we have choices about how we're going to react to it or how we'll respond to it. And we believe in a vision that we call blended reality, which is how we take the physical, how we live. And we compare it and we can combine it with the digital, our digital reality. So that digital can reinforce life. Go solve the biggest problems that humanity will face over the next 30 years. And these are just a few of the tools we intend to employ. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, address cybersecurity and trust, and do it within the context of a fully digital manufacturing world. All right. With that, please, I would love to hear questions on the topic. Stunned you into silence. Any at all, yeah.
However, we haven't touched the human factor that's going to be effective. And I don't see how we can progress the way we're intending to without controlling natality.
Without controlling
natality, the growth of more and more people.
Oh, I see. Yes. So it's a very good point, and you're exactly right. And I want to kind of come back to kind of context on here. Is the megatrends work that we do is work that takes a year to assemble. That's a very profound, deep look. That's many, many hours of work, and it addresses a lot of different areas. And a lot of it is just what will happen from government regulations to control populations or to improve health. I mentioned Africa as an example. 40% of the working age population by 2030 will live in Africa. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about what policies will be put in place, what government agencies will do in order to, one, is there a way to control that population growth? Two, what sort of programs can be put in place in order to go after that population? I mean, if you have 40% of the working age population there, and your unemployment, which is currently there today, is 50%. You have a huge number of people not gainfully employed. Good things don't happen then. So there's a set of things that we're going to do, a subset, and we talked about the technology piece to address some of those problems. But I'm not going to advertise it's going to solve all of them. It's going to take a world, it's going to take a community to address some of these fundamental issues and make it better.
Then I think that somehow we need to involve politicians, not government, politicians, to change their way of thinking, because they are not going to have as many voters as they wish if we try to control them.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And in a lot of our work, we do engage the leaders of governments, NGOs, companies themselves. In Africa, we spent time in South Africa, and that's exactly what we did, is engage them. So we all play a part. We're all part of the greater humanity, and all of us will play a role. Have to play that role in there. And that's part of what we reach out to engage. There seems to be no address, but we're not going to solve all the world's ills. No doubt about that. Yes, over here.
Basically, I'm looking at two areas, and I'm wondering if you've done some research into it or looked at it. And that's where we combine the human being with the technology. And I can't remember what that's called, cyber.
Yeah, it's kind of
bionic man, or whatever we call it. And the second is the supply chain of the supplies of materials used in printing. How do you see that?
Yeah, so kind of on the cyber, kind of this merger of humanity and machine. And we've done some work in that area, not primary research, but more of secondary research to kind of understand the state of art. There are a lot of really interesting developments in that space that are going on in research. Some of them pretty amazing, which reattaching artificial limbs and being able to actually move the limbs with thought in the brain. Proven examples of with just monitoring brain activity to be able to control things like fly a drone. I've actually seen that happen. So that will happen. It will be kind of the merger. In fact, a little tease for next year is one of our big focuses is Human 3.0 for the coming year, and that is how do we see how humans themselves are going to change. And it will be a combination of cyber sort of things that will probably happen, or happening today. But I think it will also be, as I mentioned earlier, emergence of things like CRISPR, which, if employed in positive ways, can eradicate diseases that, have been crippling to people's lives. Stay tuned. Next year, maybe we'll have a little update on what we think is going on in that space. Now, supply chains. Where do the materials come from? And it's interesting, and there's there's a lot of thoughts on it. One of them is they will come from just traditional locations of supplies. That in and of itself is going to kind of limit, where distributed manufacturing can happen. Certainly for rare materials or for particular compounds, you're going to be limited by those supplies to the degree in which they're used. But there's also a belief that you can use alternative materials that are in the local areas. Now, it's not going to work for everything, but certainly for things like tables and chairs and basic furniture and things, you have an alternative way in which you do it. That's why today some houses get built with cinder blocks, because that's the material they had. So in other places, it's done with wood. Now, if you really want to get wacky, you really want to get out there, way out there. There's a lot of interesting long-term research that deals with kind of auto mining and processing. And certainly theories about space exploration, that's how space exploration will evolve. There's that very advanced 3D printers mining asteroids to supply the materials into printers that can be used. Now, that's a little out there, I agree. Short to long. Others? Anything at all? The great thing about a lunch format is, open it up. Yeah?
How do you see with blockchain technologies a new era for democracy begins? And I mean, you can do a smart contract, electronic vote with your representative, and like new kind of things for elections.
Yeah, I do. It's I think there's going to be deployment of blockchains are going to have a lot of profound effects. Even on areas of democracy and sharing of information, and I think you see that. Just look at like Bitcoin technology there now you have a technology, or you have a currency that's basically been deployed. Nobody knows who actually developed it. It's never been public. That is now used in a wide way that no government was ever involved in or back. That it was essentially done in exchange within the people itself. That is trusted. Can you imagine trusting something like that and you don't even know who created it? That sort of technology employed in many other ways I think will be profound to see what happens in democracy.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, others, we got one here. Yeah.
Thanks, Shane, for this beautiful insight for digital spaghetti, I would call it. My question is, we've been hearing about HP Enterprise spending a lot of time on developing the machine and using photonics and various technologies on a grounds-up machine category. Is there something happening at HP Labs when you're creating a category which is different what we're doing right now? It's creating a new category. Is that something that you're working on? And are you kind of leveraging the HP Enterprise Labs also to kind of look at innovation? That's question number one. Question number two is, how much enough is digital and how much is human? Because when you look at the trends like IoT, you didn't touch upon IoT, but what's your thoughts on that, and how do you monetize this opportunity? Because though digital is good for us, but I think there is going to be a fine line where businesses will have to draw to monetize an opportunity. Thank you.
Okay. So let's see on your first one, being trying to keep track. Remind me on the first one, and I'll come back to you second. Just remind me of your question on the first.
About the new product category that you were working on. Are you working on it?
Yes, on the machine. Yeah. So Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. Actually, there was an effort that was created, that was started when we were a combined company called The Machine, that was led out of the CTO office. And then when we split the company and Hewlett-Packard Enterprise was created, The Machine development of that moved into Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. So for really the last 2 years, it's been very independent of us, right? They're a separate company and they manage their own. Having said that, as part of the split, we did retain rights to do things like that, in the future. And I do believe that for those of you who don't know what The Machine is, the simple version is, it's the idea that you take processing in the middle, and rather than in current Van Neumann architecture, which is a tiered compute architecture, cache and main memory and secondary storage, it's a compute architecture that's a flat memory address. And what that means is that all your memory, all your data can get stored immediately around the processor itself and is accessed immediately. And what enables it is very high-speed, non-volatile memory. And that core notion, we absolutely believe, and it's one that we watch very carefully. We think one of the biggest disruptions from a pure technology standpoint is high-speed, non-volatile memory development. And so that model of that direct access of memory is one we do think will affect. We will actually look at architectures in our PC space, in our print space, of how that will, when would we adopt it? Because it does have to have OS support. That's a really big piece of it. Now your second question here was around digital and analog and kind of IoT. I don't know that there's a defined line, and I don't want to imply that everything is going to go digital, right? It'll come in waves, it'll come in pieces, and there may be large chunks that just don't make any sense. I mean, some people are printing food today, right? But I don't know if that's what you do on a sustainable basis. So I don't know that comment about IoT, and you heard Dion talk about it today, and I'll just make a more specific comment about it, and that is, in a digital manufacturing world, you enable a completely different approach to IoT. Because in that case, now what you have the ability to do is the Internet of all things. And the reason is, when I'm printing digitally, and you saw the sensor that we printed, where we can print a strain gauge into a part, is I can print the electronics into the part themselves. So now a simple plastic part can have the electronics printed in it. Now today, I cannot do that at an AMD or an Intel level in terms of a 10 nanometer, but I can do fundamental structures. And I think as things progress in 3D into the subatomic level, and that will happen, because I think you're going to see that move into the electronics printed in the devices themselves. Further, in the digital world, I can print digital watermarking. I can print information on the part itself, just in the patterns that I put on the surface. Now, you guys know that today. You do digital watermarking on photography. You do little QR codes that go on all of our products. Well, imagine all of those are going to go into digital printing, but they'll be done in an invisible way. You won't see it, but you can track it, and you can follow it with a simple phone. And you can embed really interesting information in that. So then it gets rather interesting. And now just to throw out one last one, because I know we're going to run out of time. I might have a minute left. Is imagine a world of 4D printing. And we talked about IoT and being able to put the technology into the parts themselves, being able to encode them with the information. Well, imagine in a world of 4D where you can print in 3D as you know it, but it self-assembles. A lot of research that goes on. We're not doing research currently in that area, but there is a lot of university research that goes on where they can actually do that. So imagine, for those of you who know IKEA, you buy a table at IKEA, and you bring it home and you disassemble it, you get your screwdriver out, and you try not to stab yourself while you're assembling your table, and hope that when you get done with it, you didn't have spare parts for your table and it stands up. Well, imagine a world you go to IKEA, you buy the box of your table, you come home, you open it up, and the table assembles itself. It's not crazy. There's easy ways to do it with reactive materials, by applying heat, by applying water, moisture, chemical reactions. You can cause reactions at particular joints. You can solidify those joints to the activity you got. All right, I think I've given you enough crazy train talk. And I want to thank you for your time. I really appreciate your attention. It's always a challenge to do it after lunch. And I really appreciate the thoughtful questions